The Shift is brought to you by SE Healthcare. Welcome to The Shift. I'm Dr. Andrea Coyle. Shifties, welcome back to the next episode of the Shift podcast. With me today is a superstar nurse leader, Dr. Stefanie Beavers from OU Health. Stefanie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Andrea. I'm super excited to be here today.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to have you here. Stefanie, will you tell the Shifties a little bit about yourself? We'll start there. That'll be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Stefanie Beavers. I currently serve as Chief Nurse Executive for OU Health, the academic flagship health system for the state of Oklahoma. I've been in my role for a little over 2 years. I've been with OU Health for over 3 years now. I originally joined the health system to serve as the Chief Nurse Officer for our Oklahoma Children's Hospital, and soon stepped into this role to serve as the Nurse Executive for the health system. As the inaugural nurse executive, no pressure whatsoever. The organization had been through an immense amount of change, and so it was really an honor to step into this space. Clinically, my background is critical care nursing and procedural nursing, and I spent the majority of my career in North Texas prior to moving north of the Red River here to Oklahoma. So I'm super excited for today.
Well, I'm excited for you to be here. I'm excited for the Shifties to hear about your shifts. And a big shift is really moving from Texas to Oklahoma. And tell the Shifties a little bit about what that shift was like. Because when we talk about shifts, Stefanie and the rest of the Shifties, shifts can happen in many ways. And you had a geographical shift, you had a leader role shift, you had to enculturate a new team and shift culture. So tell us about that big shift.
Yeah, it was a really big change. Like I said, my entire career, I'd spent in North Texas. I actually started in residency at Parkland for critical care in UT Southwestern. And so I've worked in academic practice. I've worked in for-profit practice, worked in both. I split my bedside and clinical career in pediatrics and adults. A little bit crazy. But what I learned about myself as a nurse through some of those transitions and shifts throughout my bedside career was I love taking care of human beings. I don't care if you're 2 days old or 92 years old. My passion is taking care of patients and human beings when they're vulnerable and they need our care. All I want to do is make it better, be a protector, be an advocate for the patient. And then as I grew in leadership in different roles, it was how do we support frontline teams to provide the highest quality of care? And how do we make their life and their work better? And so I've had opportunities to shift from the bedside to then leadership. And there within North Texas, prior to coming to Oklahoma, my background as a leader was, of course, clinical manager roles, but in procedural spaces, in unique spaces for nurses. And then I grew in service line administration, and I built cerebrovascular and stroke programs and neuroscience service lines and CV service lines. I took a role at one point in surgical services. So I had this evolution in getting to see all different facets of the healthcare system that was pretty unique and we don't always see in nursing leadership as we grow up traditionally. And my last role was actually Associate Chief Nursing Officer in a community hospital for Texas Health Resources. Dr. Julie Ballack was an amazing mentor between her. Dr. Cole Edmondson really supported me in my growth. And when the opportunity came up to serve as chief nurse for the Children's Hospital in Oklahoma, it was this amazing opportunity that even as my CNO, Dr. Ballack was very supportive of me making the move, was a sounding board for me, and really helped to support me as I made that transition. Because you're right, it's a big move to go to a different state. You have to learn all of the practice aspects. What is the dynamic? What is the culture of professional practice in that space? And as a health system, we were also going through a lot of transition. OU Health had previously divested from a for-profit health system and was really in this space of creating identity as an academic flagship. And what did that mean? What was a tripartite mission really being founded in research, in education, and clinical care delivery? And so we really went on this journey of shaping what are our values? What is our vision? How do we sit in the space? Because as an academic health system and the only one for the state, we have to take care of it in entirety. It can't be just your surrounding region. So how do we live into that? And I think as we did that, one of the things that I learned, because I shifted quickly into a chief nurse seat, and that was a big change because now I'm owning this book of nursing for this hospital, and how I lead that is really impactful. But then quickly evolving and shifting into a chief nurse executive role. And that's different. You have to look at your network differently. I went out and really built relationships and networks with national chief nurses to say, I need help. Like, I was not scared to cold call and ask, like, what have you learned? Is there anything like, and there were some amazing mentors out there that really helped to support me in that transition. But what I learned and talking to others was it's so important to create the identity of professional practice. So we started with, what is our professional practice model? How do we shape that, and how do we build, what is the brand of nursing for the organization? What makes us unique being in an academic health system? We have a direct relationship with the University of Oklahoma College of Nursing. I hold a faculty appointment there. The dean for the College of Nursing is one of my greatest partners to work alongside, Dean Kraft. And so building that together was really important. And that's one of my greatest partnerships today, because it's how we build the foundation of nursing as they come through as students in those clinical rotations, and how do we build a space that they aspire to be. And I think that's really a big shift for us, because we think of how we care for patients as nurses, and transitioning in leadership to how do you create spaces of professional practice? What does it mean to be the top tier of nursing? How do you build that? And I think having to evolve and grow and own the skill set and competency of building a vision is critical. So that was one of the biggest pieces that we really started with, for how do we start to shape a cultural transformation within nursing that can help drive the performance of an organization. And I would say I really would credit the support of our executive team. I have an amazing partner in our chief medical officer, Dr. Carolyn Falk, to be that other half that helps with balancing what is change management, how do we drive through process and high reliability, and setting the definitions for the organization in lockstep. And there has never been a time that we have not had the full support of our executive leadership team. And I think that's unique. But it was a big way that I found a source of support as I needed to shift and evolve and grow as a nurse and as a leader.
I love everything you said. And, so much of this is critical about creating partnerships, relationships, meaningful connections. And I really appreciate and respect when you said it's so important. Your passion is to take care of people, whether they're 2 days old or 92 years old. The thing that I find really remarkable about your leadership is you take that same passion with the people taking care of the people. And you've done such a great job at OU Health of creating this culture. I like to call it the human experience, but you've created this culture. Can you give shifties and anyone listening a couple lessons learned on the value of creating a culture? And just want to preface it by saying, to actually shift or change a culture takes up to 18 months. It is not a quick fix. What are some of your tips on how to change a culture?
Well, I think cultural transformation is not for the faint of heart. I think it's also something that you really have to identify and get comfortable being uncomfortable. That sounds really cliche, but when you start to look at change management and cultural transformation, being able to clearly articulate your identity, being able to articulate what's the vision, where are we at today and where are we going? Because it's important. Your teams need to be able to hear that you recognize what they're setting in. You've got to have the space of empathy and compassion for your teams and what they're in today, You have to have a healthy respect for what they have experienced over time in transition. And how do you stay steady for them? Because one of the hardest things when you look at cultural transformation, it is so easy to get in and be like, ooh, I think we need to change that again. Or I think we need to shift back, or we need to change. And so you have to look at, okay, what's the right thing to do? Let's put a foundation and a framework in. And then how do we live into that? And how do you make it so that it is not rapid cycle? Because then you give your teams whiplash and they don't know what to expect. So consistency really is key. Creating an identity, creating a vision. And I think for as you grow in leadership and as you shift through these different roles, as an executive, one of the biggest pieces is how do I take the 100,000-foot view and have a long-term trajectory vision? And I make sure that I keep what do we have to do today to be safe? What do we have to do today to wrap around our teams? But make sure that they know every step and every incremental change is what's going to change our long-term tenure. And once you start to feel it, you have to leverage the momentum. And I think that you can't lose sight of that. And it is hard. It is so hard to keep pace and to keep that clear tunnel vision of where you're going and not be tone deaf. So it really is about foundation. It's about consistency. And it is about sitting in the hard moments with your team. Because there are times that I think we take for granted. You sit in a higher level executive seat and the way you make decisions has to change. I know that some of my decisions will impact individuals in the way that they work, but on a larger scale for the organization and most importantly for patients. If it's the right thing to do, sometimes the hard call is the one that you have to make. And so how you do that, but also acknowledge it's hard and also acknowledge the moments that suck. If I'm being really honest and transparent and being vulnerable with your teams and saying, I know this is uncomfortable. We're going to work through this as a team and I'm going to sit in the hard space with you and we are going to push through. And I think sometimes just the acknowledgement of what they're experiencing is so imperative. But I think also you have to be really cautious. When you're at that 100,000-foot view, how do I not be tone deaf? So from a cultural piece, it's that and leveraging the momentum. But I'm a huge Brene Brown fan. And when you think about strong ground, your teams need an anchor. They need someone that they know is going to be steadfast with them, is going to be consistent, and is fair on even to the point of clarity around consequences. If we don't do this, what will happen? We can stay where we are, or we can outperform and we can set a space where excellence is a standard. We may not be there today, but these are the changes and moves we have to make to get there. So that I think the art of storytelling is one of the most important things that as leaders we can do. Connecting the dots.
That's right.
You're great at the bedside. We are so great at the bedside. And then sometimes we step away and we forget that all of those skills that it takes to take care of a human being and a patient translates so easily to how we take care of our teams. And so it's always going back to that, I think. And, we talk about shifts and how you move through your career. You can never lose sight of what you experienced at the bedside, because your worst day that's ever been in your career, you have team members today that are experiencing that. How do you acknowledge it and how do you work to make it better? When you can't make it better, how do you own it and say it and sit in the space with them? I think those are the moments of cultural transformation that become critical and key to getting others buy-ins and getting people to follow you. Some of those are some of the biggest moments that you can have. And they're so simple.
And they are simple. And I do this Reignite, Inspire, Support, Empower presentation all over the country. And I usually start off by asking people in the room, if you could name one word that comes to mind when you hear the word leadership. People not often, sometimes say the word consistent. And I heard you mention consistent more than once. And when you think about culture, culture is language, behaviors, values. And when you can use the word consistent and you can demonstrate consistency, to your point, Stefanie, that is part of the foundation of creating this culture that is really going to evolve into great. And my son always says, hard work equals greatness. And it
Yeah.
is very hard to shift a culture. I have another question for you, Stefanie, about stepping into the CNE role. Um, what do you think was the aha moment for you when you were like, wow, I'm the CNE of the system, OU Health, and wow, I really get it. And wow, I really see the culture shifting.
Ooh. I
That
think
was,
there's
that was
been
a lot of words for one question, but
I think there's been so many moments along the way. And I think the gravity of sitting in the seat, there was a moment that our chief executive officer, Dr. Rick Lofgren, who is, you talk about leaders you would follow to the end of the earth and step off the end of the earth for, he is absolutely one. Just the utmost integrity. He is internal medicine background. But I remember early in the role, he came to me and shared, he really felt like when we talk about shifting culture of the organization, he felt strongly that we could do that through nursing, the professional practice of nursing. And I remember the gravity of that conversation and to be vulnerable. It was like, how am I going to lead this? Because it was so big and the organization had been through so much change. And so stepping back and thinking, how am I going to be able to shape this? And it's that space of elevating to that high role and that seat of chief nurse. And how do I make sure I'm bridging this chasm and supporting our teams? And it's all about culture. And I remember starting to say and articulate, like, we are the top tier of nursing for the state of Oklahoma. And I remember thinking people are probably going to think I'm crazy, and we are going to keep pushing and we're going to keep doing this. And then it was really stepping back and looking at some of the high performing academic health systems and looking at their chief nurses and saying, what did they build? And so I started there and looked at what do we need to build? What actually do we have today? What is our nursing workforce? What is our culture? And what are the fundamental pieces that we have to make sure we have identity? Number one, that we have safe processes. Everything comes down to people and processes. How do we support them? How do we build it? And so I think that was a big piece of where I started. And when you talk about the aha moment, I remember that being a moment of feeling the weight of the role. I had a colleague at one point that said, heavy is the head that wears the crown. And I remember thinking, there are going to be some tough moments. And Marilyn Degree, that was at Vanderbilt, I remember once was so gracious to tell me, when you have a hard day and you get home and you're having a hard moment and you need someone to talk to, I'm there. And it was so important because here is this really seasoned nurse executive that has built an empire that was like, you need a source of support that's outside of your organization, that's outside of your immediate service area and market. And so it was great to have these people across the country that were willing to pour into me. So I will say that was like vital for me. When I started to see it shift, I will say my first time of going to, we have a Great 100 foundation for the state of Oklahoma, and we went to their awards ceremony. And I can't remember how many nurses were named the first year. It was right after I started with the organization. And when I got there, we didn't fill our table. The leaders didn't fill the table that we had gotten. And I remember it being this moment that really broke my heart for how many people weren't there to show up for the nurses that had received this just amazing award and recognition. And when I sat at the table this year, we had multiple tables. We had operational leaders, not just nursing leaders, that showed up, and we had 34 nurses named to the Great 100 for Oklahoma. And it was this moment of pride, and you just saw, like, I felt we are really making headway with our culture of nursing practice. And to see that meaningful recognition, because you hear that so much right now in healthcare. How is it meaningful recognition? And it was just a moment and a data point. And I think the other piece of that is the first residency graduation that I went to within the organization. Very few of the residents were in attendance. Not many leaders showed up. And I really had a hard time. I think our CEO would probably tell you I had a moment of righteous anger. And to be very vulnerable and transparent, it broke my heart. I had never had this experience where nursing was just not a powerhouse in the organization. And so as I look at it today with an auditorium full, we had our largest cohort of nursing residents graduate in December, and it was, or in August. And it was this moment. We had to find a new space to hold the event. How many people came up and showed up? Our chief operating officer, our chief human resources officer, all these members of our executive leadership team, and what that says to your nurses coming into practice. It's just, those are the moments that I start to feel like it's taking hold. And that culture of excellence, we're starting to build it and we've got momentum. And what I tell my leaders is we can't stop. These are the moments that we push. We've got momentum. We've got people that know we believe in them and they believe in us, and we have to live into that. Because they're the most important people of what we do. They do the most noble work within healthcare. So them being seen and having those moments of recognition has been when I really start to feel the culture has started to shift and take hold.
And everything you just described is 100% an example of a shift. It's also an example of, the culture went from, I'll say, lackadaisical, meaningful recognition to uber meaningful recognition, which, by the way, is one of the guiding principles for a healthy work environment from the AACN, which is awesome. And I just have to say, I'm really confident, Stefanie, under your leadership, that this will continue to evolve into super greatness. And I am also confident that Oklahoma is going to be a powerhouse of nursing under your great leadership. So I want to thank you for your leadership. I want to thank you for being vulnerable. And I also want to invite you to come back to the shift in about 6 or 9 months, because I'm confident that the shifties want to hear more about the great strides and progress you're making at OU Health and across the great state of Oklahoma. Any last parting words, Stefanie, for the shifties that you think they have to hear? But one thing I do want to say, which I so respect about your leadership, is your ability to remain so present. And I don't think often people recognize how valuable it is for a leader to be present in the moment. And you do such a great job with that. So that's kind of my takeaway for the shifties listen today, is if you can do anything, be present, because Dr. Stefanie Beavers does a fabulous job of being present, one of her many, many great qualities. So one word of wisdom for the shifties.
I think courageous confidence. I think sometimes it is so hard to be confident during periods of change. And I think really recognizing this is a team sport. We say it sometimes, but it is a huge team sport. And nursing has such power to bring other disciplines together, to partner with others, because it's not possible. High quality, safe care is not possible with us alone, but we can be a powerhouse and an agent for change. And I think it really does take courageous confidence at times and incredible vulnerability and grace. And presence is something that I really strive for. My greatest fear is that I will lose touch and become tone deaf. At the end of the day, I was one of these nurses 20 years ago, and on my hardest shift, I can remember how my leadership showed up. And those moments where you feel seen and supported, and how you drive high quality care and the difference you can make as a nurse. I think that courage to just sit in that space and to lead, and with consistency, it really is being steadfast, recognizing that you are the anchor and what that really means. Because sometimes it's really uncomfortable, but man, when you are surrounded by a team There's not, it's just remarkable the change that you can drive. And I just want to say thank you. You are an amazing force for change, and you're an amazing force for how we advance the professional practice of nursing. So I am incredibly honored to be a part of your show, to be a part of your network, and the support that you have offered to me, that you provide to me and my team. And so I would love it and be honored to come back. I appreciate you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you so much for saying that. And I can't wait to come back and have you on the podcast and we can learn more from you. And so I always end the show, shifties, remember, your shift makes the difference. Keep shifting. Enjoying the shift? Help us reach more nurse leaders by rating and reviewing us on your podcast app. It takes just a minute, but makes a big impact. Search for The Shift, tap those stars, and share what you love. Your feedback shapes our future episodes and helps others discover us. Remember, rate, review, and amplify The Shift today.